Hey folks, welcome to my kitchen. So I've been getting a lot of requests about what I eat in a day, and I've done some videos of the sort, but I wanted to do something more thorough, go over how I do some meal prep, what I eat specifically on a typical day, if it's like 3 meals a day, and how I prepare it conveniently and cost effectively. So as you can see, I'm all prepared right here. I got my apron on. This is very important right here because I have like these really expensive shirts. I don't want to get ruined. And I also have my hat right here. And I know a lot of people watch my videos for hair loss related content. And I will say how much hair you're shedding into your food is a good measurement of how bad your hair loss is. But that's not very appetizing. So this is going to stay on for now. So anyways, let's get into it. So in addition to choosing healthy food items, I also want to make sure that I prioritize health. And so even though I will occasionally eat out and go for gourmet vegan food options, a lot of people think that vegan food is expensive, and I don't want to propagate that stereotype by getting a lot of expensive pre-prepared processed foods. Rather, I want to stick with basic bulk simplistic foods because if you guys watch my lifting video, I talk about the importance of simplicity, how less is more. I'd say the same thing applies to cuisine. You want to stick with simple foods that you can buy in bulk. So like grains, vegetables, like starchy vegetables, like sweet potatoes, foods that are nutritious but also high in calories, because you're not going to be able to fuel an effective workout if you're just eating things like greens. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and prepare individual meals. I'm going to show you how I prepare them conveniently. And so I'm going to show you the finished product, and let's go ahead and get started with how I have a breakfast. All right, so the first thing we're gonna prepare is a tofu scramble. I mean, I love tofu scramble. It's very flavorful, and one thing that's good about protein is that it adds a lot of satiety to your meal, so you don't eat a lot of extra craps like refined sugar, simple carbohydrates like that. You eat the food and then you feel full, you feel satisfied, you feel like you're ready to take on the day. So my base for this meal is going to be tofu, which I should say is a very, very good source of protein. I mean, just this block alone has about 50 grams of protein, and a gram of protein is 4 calories, so that's just 200 calories from protein alone, and that doesn't count the protein that's found in the other products like the nutritional yeast, everything, because every food has protein and amino acids in it. I mean, every food except for refined oils and refined sugars, which you don't want to eat very much of to begin with. So I'm going to go ahead and start by prepping this. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this guy in here right now. I'm going to mash it up. And this is like the firm tofu. You can use other kind of tofu as well, but I like the firm one because it has kind of like a texture like scrambled eggs. Now, I should mention, I've been a vegan since about 2003, so I don't even remember what eggs taste like. So you shouldn't eat this with the expectation that it's going to taste exactly like eggs, but it does taste good, and that's all that matters. If you can find something that's nutritious, flavorful, provides a lot of, that's easy to prepare, not very expensive, that's all that matters. So let's go ahead, add some sweet potatoes, very good source of complex carbohydrates, the slow metabolizing carbohydrates that are great for fueling your workout. And one thing that's really important about just carbohydrates in general is that they're protein retentive. So when you're eating protein, you want to make sure that the protein that you're eating is used for the repair and resynthesis of muscle tissue. So if you're not eating enough carbohydrates, specifically the slow metabolizing carbohydrates that are more likely to be stored in your muscles as glycogen, then you're going to be much more likely to waste protein as an energy source. Like, your body doesn't like using protein as energy. And look, I just spilled some right there, my bad, because I was looking at the camera while stirring. But anyways, as I was saying, your body doesn't like to use protein as an energy source, but it will in the absence of carbohydrates. So it'll turn protein into glucose through a process in the liver called gluconeogenesis, and that's not good. And another cool thing I should mention about carbohydrates, specifically the good kind of carbohydrates, because let's face it, a sweet potato is not the same as drinking a Mountain Dew, is that glucose, carbohydrates, are the only energy source that could be stored directly into the muscle tissue and the liver as muscle glycogen. So it's more readily available for high intensity anaerobic activity. And that's very important because, I mentioned anaerobic, that means without oxygen. And if you're talking about the muscle fibers in the body that are most subject to hypertrophy, those are the type 2B muscle fibers. I mean, you guys can look that up if you're curious about the whole physiology of it. But simply put, those type of muscle fibers are not very high in mitochondria, so they cannot utilize oxygen effectively. So they respond best to high intensity activity. So once initial ATP stores are depleted, your body's going to turn to glycogen as its primary fuel source for high intensity activity. And so that's why I personally prefer to use carbohydrate-rich foods as well as protein-rich foods to fuel my workout. Because protein, that's for recovery, but when I'm doing my high-intensity workouts, I want to make sure I have some nice, clean, healthy, complex carbohydrates in my diet. And we got some onions here, and this doesn't provide much in the way of calories, but vegetables in general, you want to eat them because they just provide health benefits. They have a lot of antioxidants in them, and they also add some good flavor in them. So I like my food spicy, so I'm going to get some jalapenos in it. I don't want to overcook them because that gets rid of a lot of the spiciness right there. And of course, you get some good calcium. You get a lot of other good antioxidants with broccoli. You get like some iron. You get some other good micronutrients, even if it doesn't provide much in the way of macronutrients. And also, I like to eat a lot of mushrooms. And the cool thing about mushrooms, a lot of vegans underestimate just how important it is to have mushrooms. These are just some simple table mushrooms, but any kind of mushroom will suffice. Is that mushrooms are a very good source of vitamin D. And vitamin D is a pretty hard micronutrient to come across. If you're a vegan, and it's absolutely an essential nutrient. You can get it from like sunlight exposure, but if you're worried about skin health, you don't want to spend too much time in the sun anyways, even if you have sunscreen on. So you can either supplement it or you can get it directly from your diet. So that's where mushrooms come in, because they're the only source of vitamin D other than fortified foods. There's some plant milks that have vitamin D in them, but as far as natural sources of vitamin D goes, you got mushrooms as pretty much your only option if you're a vegan, which is fine because mushrooms are plenty good for your health right here. So you got like a really, really colorful, beautiful looking setup right here. It's going to look a little bit different once it's cooked, but this is our base right here. We got plenty of vegetables. We got plenty of starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes, and we have tofu, which is our main source of protein right here, which is of course really good because I like to try to get at least 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. And I'm going to go ahead and go through a chronometer once this is all done to figure out the exact macronutrient breakdown so you guys can examine it, make modifications for yourself based on your nutritional needs and depending on your activity level and just what you're interested in. So anyways, let's go to the next step. Okay, so we're at the next step right here. We're over here at my stove, and we're going to go ahead and cook this guy. So the first thing you want to do is that, you don't necessarily have to cook with oils. I cook with a little bit of oil, even though I don't typically recommend it because, refined vegetable oils aren't very good for you. So I only use a little bit just to break it up. This is safflower oil. Now, this is not what I'd call a healthy oil, but if you're using just a very small amount of it, like, less than a teaspoon, it's not that big of a deal. But the reason why I use safflower oil is because it doesn't, it can be cooked at high heat. You can't really use like refined olive oil. You can also use coconut oil, but that's typically very high in saturated fat, so I avoid that. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this stuff. Let's just see. There we go. Just kind of shake it out a little bit. That should be good. So that's a negligible amount. So, even if that's not good for you, it's balanced out by all the goodness that's about to be put in the pot. So let's go ahead and turn this guy on. All right, so let's get the on medium heat. You don't want to cook it too high per se, otherwise it's just gonna get too soggy too quickly. So I'm gonna go ahead and dump this guy in, try to be as careful as possible. I don't claim to be a gourmand, but I think I have at least good enough aim so that it doesn't spill on the stove and set my house on fire. So anyways, it's all in there, and as far as like the time frame goes, that's going to be based on like the quantity of the food you're cooking, but you typically want to wait until it's has a nice good brownness to it, and occasionally like test the vegetables to make sure that they're not too soft, not too hard. They could be a little al dente. That's just a preference right here, but this is going to typically take maybe 10 to 15 minutes or so before it's ready. So let's not go ahead and watch the whole thing cooking. Let's skip ahead a little bit and we'll see what the final product looks like. But just make sure you stir periodically. All right, so we're a little bit into cooking our tofu scramble right here. And there's a slight amount of brown, which is what you're looking for. So what I like to add to it is turmeric. I talked about this a little bit. Now, turmeric is a very healthy spice. There's even some mechanistic data that supports that this might be effective at fighting tumors. They tested it on animals. Not that I ever approve of that, but that's definitely beneficial information to have if you're going to be cooking with it. But to the point, The reason why I add this is because it gives it a little bit of like a yellow coloring, so it tends to replicate more what the food is trying to imitate, if that's important to you, but it also adds a nice little flavor as well. So you're gonna add as much of this as you need. I like to add about a half a tablespoon, or half a teaspoon, I should say. So let's go ahead and get this powder out. It can be a little bit hard to run out here, so let me just get a little bit more in. Yeah, you may have to shake a little bit, and you know, it doesn't have to be exact, and you know, some already spilled in here, so we'll just go ahead and add that real quick, get a little bit more because that wasn't quite a teaspoon. And yeah, there's a little bit extra right there, so let me just go ahead and put that back there. Okay, a little bit of a mess, I'll clean that up later. Let's go ahead and add that here, and you want to stir it up real nicely. And it may not look like it terribly right now, but that will add a good amount of yellowing as it cooks, and the, you know, the flavors spread, the spices spreads and everything. And for additional flavor, this is optional, but you know, I recommend it if you want to have a good tasting breakfast. And you know, taste is important because it encourages palatability, and if you're talking about something that is overall healthy, adding something that's just slightly unhealthy for the sake of encouraging palatability and being consistent with it is always a good thing. So we're going to add some liquid aminos. I mean, you can use soy sauce, but this is a little bit lower in sodium, so I like this. This is the Bragg's brand. I mean, there's some generic variants which are cheaper. Probably recommend that, but this is what I can find. I had a coupon for it, so we're gonna go ahead and add that. Once again, stir it really nicely. Yeah. And you know, for my absolute favorite, this has kind of like a cheese-like flavor in it. This is Bragg's nutritional yeast. I mean, I can almost snort this like a mountain of cocaine if you ever watch Scarface. That's how good it is. But this is some of the most nutritious stuff on the planet. And most importantly, it's a very good source of B12. Now, if you're supplementing B12, no big deal. But this is about, you know, 563% of your daily value recommendation of, or your RDA of vitamin B12. And you know, people can argue, oh, it's not a natural source of B12, but you know, who cares? If you care about nature, then you shouldn't be wearing clothes. You should just be a nudist, because clothes aren't natural either. But the important thing is that this is very high in B12. A lot of other vitamins too. You got like niacin, folate, vitamin B6, a lot of potassium, riboflavin. And it's also a very good source of protein. You have 5 grams for just 1 tablespoon. So 1 tablespoon is exactly what I'm going to add. But you know, if I want to add even more protein to my food, like if I feel I'm not hitting my macros, not that I'm super orthodox about that, then you know, I may add a little bit more, and all the better, because this stuff is very flavorful. So let's go ahead, get this crap in the tablespoon, and you just look at that right there. That's like just like a yellow powder, but interestingly enough, it has like a cheese-like flavor. And you know, I haven't eaten cheese from a long time, but a lot of people tell me it kind of reminds them of cheese. And you know, a lot of people add cheese to their eggs just for flavor. But the good thing is that this is not just flavorful, but it's very, very nutritious as well. So let's stir this in. And you know, we also have some salsa right here. This is medium salsa. Usually I like hot salsa, but you know, I think I have the jalapenos in here, so it's gonna be spicy enough. So we're gonna get like, you know, roughly like 3 tablespoons in, but you know, it doesn't really matter. Just put on as much as you'd like. I mean, salsa, you can't really go wrong with it. It's low in calories, it's high in micronutrients. It's just it's a very healthy condiment. It's not like adding ketchup or anything to it. It's also very flavorful. Goes very well with the dish. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just kind of sprinkle this stuff in, and I'm just gonna estimate that's roughly like 3 tablespoons right there. But that's typically what I do add to it, but you know, maybe I'll add more or a little bit less. And it also prevents it from getting too dry, because you know, as you cook it, the tofu will dehydrate a little bit. So if you add some salsa, that'll make sure it doesn't taste too, and that makes it so you don't feel like you have to consume like a gallon of water when you're eating your tofu scramble. Not that drinking water is a bad thing. I mean, I definitely want to encourage that. But anyways, we're mixing in. I'm actually getting a little bit more salsa in because I feel that you could use a little bit more. So there's a little bit more. And so we got a lot of flavor, but the important thing is that the stuff we've added for flavor is stuff that's also very nutritionally dense. So here is how it looks in the middle of cooking, and it's almost done. So let me go ahead and do an edit and show you what the final product looks like. All right, so here we are with the near finished product, and you can go ahead and just eat this as it is. I mean, a lot of times I'll do that, but if I want to get a little bit more calories in my diet, maybe get a few more carbohydrates, what I'll do is I'll take a tortilla. Now, most of the tortillas you find at supermarket are absolute crap, so you want to look out for things like hydrogenated oils, trans fats, all those are also refined sugars. So I typically go for like either whole wheat, organic, because if it's organic, I mean, organic usually doesn't matter to me, but in the case of something like a tortilla, organic's important because it means that there's no hydrogenated fats in them. And that's, of course, really important because hydrogenated fats are trans fats, and you know everybody agrees that trans fats cause heart disease. So this is a sprouted grain tortilla, and like I said, this is completely optional. You can just eat it as it is right here. So what I'll do, if I want like a breakfast, you know, I'll maybe make a few of these things, or you know, maybe I'll do like some tortilla and some without it, depending on how many extra calories I want to add to my diet. So I'll go ahead and just take maybe like 3 heaping tablespoons of this good stuff. And if you'd like, you can add a little bit more nutritional yeast to it, or you can add like a good vegan cheese like Daya, Follow Your Heart cheese if you want, just add a little bit more flavor. Or you can add like some hot sauce and Tabasco sauce in here, but I'm probably just gonna pour salsa on top of it. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap it. And I'm gonna do this to the best of my ability. I'm definitely not a pro like those guys at Chipotle who roll the burritos, but I'll do my best. So anyways, I wanna get it nice and tight, put it on the plate. And you know, maybe a little bit spilled out. Got some lipstick right here, but that's okay. And here's like a little burrito. Looks a little bit more like a chimichanga because there's a small one, but you can always use bigger tortillas if you want a bigger burrito. But you know, I'll do this, maybe have 1 or 2 and then just put the rest on the plate. Another thing I wanted to add is basically what you can do if you're doing meal prep. So let's say that you want to cook like for several days in advance rather than just preparing a meal that you can eat then and now. So what I like to do if I'm going to do something like that is that I'll just go ahead and wrap them individually in these tortillas. And as you can see, we got about 8 here. And you know, honestly, I have a bottomless pit appetite. So you know, this would last maybe like, you know, a couple days for me, but you know, for a lot of people, based on their nutritional requirements, based on their basal metabolism, this may last several days for them. So here's one wrapped in aluminum foil, and what I'll do is that I'll just wrap these individually in aluminum foil, and I'll put them in the freezer, and you have a very healthy, nutritious breakfast burrito. That will last indefinitely, so long as it's in the freezer. So whenever you're hungry, you can go ahead and just throw it in the microwave for like 3 minutes, maybe a little bit longer or shorter based on how powerful your microwave is. But that's a very convenient way to have something that's calorically dense, that's nutritionally dense, that's vegan, available for you at any time throughout the day. All right, so what we have here is basically a finished product with the burrito. The presentation is a little bit nicer here. I didn't add this for presentation. I just like the taste of cilantro. So I put a little bit of salsa on it, and let's get some extra nutritional yeast on. Like I said, you can't eat too much of this stuff. I mean, this stuff is just so awesome. I can't stress enough how much this is like basically my nutritional lifeblood right here. So, except you don't want to do that, especially if you have company over. So we'll just worry about that later. All right, so you know, it's rude to eat with a hat on, so let me take my hat off. And let's go ahead and take a bite of this, see how it tastes. So it's piping hot. You want to be careful not to nuke it too long, otherwise you're going to burn your mouth, but very spicy, even with just medium salsa. It's very spicy, extremely flavorful. And that's what's great about tofu, is that tofu is kind of, has no flavor to it, and that's why it has a bad rep. But the cool thing about it is that it absorbs flavors very well. And that's what makes it a very good meat replacement, because let's face it, when people cook meat, they typically salt the meat to add flavor to it. So meat doesn't really have very much flavor to it to begin with, and that's why we flavor it with like seasoning, which is like plant, salt, pepper, like just spices in general. And tofu can be prepared the same way. It really soaks in the flavors. You can really taste the turmeric in it. You can taste the little bit of the liquid aminos, and you definitely taste the Bragg nutritional yeast, and it does give it kind of like a cheese-like flavor. So this is very good, and it's also just a very convenient way to have something that's tasty, nutritious, and just easy to prepare at any time. All right, let me go ahead and finish this. All right, so, you know, we've had our breakfast and everything, but, you know, a lot of times we may get a little bit hungry, whether we're at work or, you know, maybe we're camping and we're trying to, like, tide us over until it's lunchtime or dinner time, depending on how high your meal frequency is. So in that case, you're going to want a snack. So you want to make sure the snack is something that is satiating, makes you feel full. So you want to avoid for refined carbohydrates. You don't have like Doritos, potato chips, those kind of things that add a lot of calories that are difficult to moderate, are nutritionally virtually void, and they don't fill you up basically. So those are crap. So you want to have something that's healthy, but you also want to have something that's fairly convenient, because you can't really rely on very fancy meal prep for something like a snack. So, this is just a snack, so I don't have my hat on for this one, because, you don't need a hat for just a snack. But, of course, highly recommend a chef hat for any kind of other meal prep. So what we have here are garbanzo beans, and this is a can of garbanzo beans. I mean, a lot of people will like soak their own beans, and that's fine, but I find this a little bit more convenient, and there's nothing wrong with canned garbanzo beans. Just make sure you get it with the non-BPA lining, and preferably the kind without sodium added to it. So anyways, garbanzo beans are a very excellent source of protein. They're also very high in zinc, a good source of healthy carbohydrates, dietary fiber, just a very nutritionally dense food. So what you want, and you can really just have this by itself, just eat it right out of the can. I've done that before. But what if I want to have like a very flavorful, healthy snack, I'll go a little bit the extra mile, and I'll go ahead and dump the garbanzo beans in like any kind of container. And then I'll add some cherry tomatoes, and cherry tomatoes are just delicious. I love tomatoes in general. I try to grow them. They're kind of like liquid sunshine as far as like the taste goes. They just taste very refreshing, very savory. So I love adding tomatoes to my food, whether it be in its whole form or in something like salsa. And then I'll go ahead and take some oregano, because that's just, you can do fresh oregano. This is actually fresh oregano right here, but dried oregano is just fine, and this just adds some additional flavor to it. Probably has some good health benefits as well, as most spices and vegetables do. And then what I'll do next is I'll add some mustard, and this is Dijon mustard. This is my favorite. Now, I abstain from alcohol completely, but it does say this has white wine, so I'm just going to have to assume it's a pretty negligible amount. I've never gotten drunk eating this stuff before. And I use a good amount of this stuff. I'll use about like a half tablespoon even, just because it's very delicious. I love Dijon mustard. And, it doesn't have to be Grey Poupon, but, that's what was at the supermarket. It's what was cheap, so it's what I got. So add a little bit of that. And then after that, I'll just add like, however much Tabasco and apple cider vinegar I want to add. So I'll go ahead and just grab some apple cider vinegar, and you can pick like maybe a few capfuls of it, or just a few teaspoons, but I just like to sprinkle a little bit on. Now, apple cider vinegar is very flavorful. Just be careful not to add too much, because it is kind of an enamel destroyer, so it's not very good for the teeth. And Tabasco is just a very flavorful way to add a little bit of heat. I like to use the regular Tabasco. If this is a little bit too spicy for you, you can go ahead and try the garlic Tabasco, or you can just suck it up and try the spicy Tabasco, because if you don't like spicy food, shame on you. But anyways, I'll add a little bit of this stuff, and it's flavorful, adds a negligible amount of sodium, so it's a healthy way to just get a little bit of an extra flavor to a snack like that. So you saw that. And even with all my narration and explanation of things I was adding, this took just like, a couple minutes to make. So this is a very convenient way to get a very healthy snack in your diet. And there's a lot of healthy snacks. You can have like whole fruit, even like having like carrots available, like an apple, that's all good. But the thing about me is that since I live a pretty physically active lifestyle, I like to put emphasis on protein and carbohydrates like I described at the beginning. So fruit, whole fruit, that's all good and everything. I will try to incorporate that in my diet, even though you may not see that much of it in today's meal prep. But the thing is, I like to emphasize protein, so fruit is not like a very common snack. It's not a super common snack for me. And if it is a snack, I'll try to get like some other high protein snacks in it as well. So like beans, it doesn't have to be chickpeas, it can be black peas. I just think that chickpeas taste the best. And they're also, I think they're higher in zinc than other beans. And zinc can sometimes be a nutrient of concern for a lot of vegans. Not that you can't get it, it's just a little bit harder to find compared to something like iron, for instance, which is readily available and you can find in pretty much any legume. So anyways, I'm not going to go ahead and store this, but I'm going to go ahead and probably just eat this right now. And you can store it in like a jar, a bottle, or you can even just put it back in the can and just wrap it up and just you can store it in the refrigerator at work, or you can eat it right on the spot. But there you have it right there. Just garbanzo beans, tomatoes, oregano, Tabasco sauce, some apple cider vinegar. If you want to add a little bit of olive oil to it, you can. I try to avoid refined oils, even allegedly healthy ones like olive oil, because even though it's not completely nutritionally void, it does have some vitamin E in it. I think that the amount of extra empty calories refined oils have is not really desirable towards my fitness goals. So anyways, there you have it. Let's go ahead and move on to lunch. All right, so, we had our snack, we had breakfast, so it's time to make lunch. And, since lunch is serious business, let me get my chef's hat back on. All right, very important I put that on, as you guys already saw my hair, so at least you guys won't be able to accuse me of, hiding my male pattern baldness or anything like that. So what we're gonna make today is another, very balanced meal. When I say balanced, I mean balanced within, protein and carbohydrates. Now, I haven't talked about fat. I just want to address that real quickly. Now, fat is, of course, an essential macronutrient. It's important for hormone synthesis. It's important for the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. However, I have found personally that so long as I get enough calories in my diet, I'm not getting too little fat. So, I'm getting at least 15-20% of my calories from fat, maybe a little bit less than that, but not so little that is causing any endocrinological problems or anything like that. So fat is not something I prioritize too much. So with that said, I want to talk about what I'm going to be making for lunch. So I'm going to be making a basic black bean and rice and vegetable lunch, but also I want to make something a little bit fancy. This is going to be guacamole, but it's going to be guacamole made from peas. And guacamole, even with avocados, is a perfectly acceptable lunch. It's a perfectly acceptable food. But like I said, I like to put emphasis on protein. And even though avocados, guacamole, it's very high in healthy fats, I want something that's a little bit higher in protein. And pea guacamole is lower in total calories. I mean, not that that's a huge issue, but if you're cutting, that might be an important issue for you. But it's also several times higher in protein and lower in fat. So for me personally, this is important for me. So we have some just regular green peas right here, and these were frozen. It's cheaper when you get them frozen. Nothing wrong with getting frozen. And I just ran them under hot water to thaw them out. So what we have here is a Cuisinart. Whenever I say a Cuisinart, I'm reminded of Rick Moranis from Spaceballs. So it always brings a smile to my face. So let's go ahead and pour this stuff in. And I'm gonna go ahead and get this guy going. And careful with this stuff. The blades are very sharp, so don't stick your finger down there. Don't leave your cat in there or anything. All right, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, we'll let this blend for a little while, then we'll move on to the next part. Okay. All right, so this is the final, almost the final product right here. These are all the peas that are all mashed up right here. It has this very vibrant green. Green is my favorite color. It looks beautiful right now. And this is what I could like to consider protein guacamole because it's much higher in protein than avocado-based guacamole. But again, there's nothing wrong with that kind of stuff. So after that, what you add to it is up to you. But here's what I typically like to add to it. So I'll add a little bit of apple cider vinegar and lemon juice right here. And that just adds a good amount of flavor, gives a little bit of acidity. You want to kind of stir it up as you add your ingredients right there. And looks about the same right here. And now this here, this is just a preference right here. I mean, I love jalapenos, but these are raw jalapenos that I cut up. And these are going to be substantially hotter than anything you find that's in a can. And I also use a lot too, but that's because, I like it hot. And, I know that people have different sensitivities to spicy foods. So use only as much as you want to, but I'm going to go ahead and use the whole thing because, that's how I roll right there. Let's go ahead and mix it in. And, of course, I love tomatoes. I have some leftovers from my snack, actually. These are the same cherry tomatoes I had before. I quartered them this time, so they're just a little bit easier to scoop up. I'm going to go ahead and mix these guys in. All right, sweet. Okay, and we got some onions, of course. I like onions, and, you can use other things like garlic. Oh, and there's the toast right there. I'm going to be using that in a moment because I am going to be making some protein guacamole toast. And of course we also have some cilantro right here. Cilantro goes well on everything. And I know that some people have this weird genetic mutation where cilantro tastes like soap. Maybe a little oregano would be good in that case as a substitute, or nothing at all based on your preference. But if you like cilantro like me, you'll probably like the way I prepare it right here. And even though this looks like a lot of food, I mean, it's not super high in calories. It's very high in protein there, though. It's low in fat. So it's a type of guacamole that's better suited towards my performance goals as someone who does strength training 4 to 6 times per week. So anyways, let's go ahead and get to the toast. All right, so here's the first part of my lunch. This is the protein guacamole toast right here. And before I go over if I try it or anything, I want to go ahead and show you guys the bread I use. Now, some people, they may have a gluten intolerance or a self-diagnosed gluten intolerance, but if for some reason you can't eat bread, I mean, there are surely alternatives you can use in its place, or you don't even have to use bread. But I like to use this because it's a sprouted grain. It's a little bit more nutritious, has a little bit more fiber in it. And, you know, I feel that if I don't get at least like 20, 30 grams of fiber per day, which is absolutely no problem whatsoever, then I get a little bit constipated. I mean, sorry if that's a little bit too much information. But this is also 4 grams of protein, as you can see right here. So it's a good way to add a little bit of protein to the already protein-rich avocado toast. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my hat off again because you know I'm about to eat. Man, it is a hot day today. I don't have air conditioning in my house either. So anyways, let's go ahead and take a bite of this stuff, see how it tastes. It's really good. Now, it doesn't taste exactly the same as guacamole made from avocados because, you know, why would it? It doesn't have any guacamole avocados in it. But I will say one good thing about this stuff is that, you know, regular guacamole, let's say you buy the prepackaged stuff or if you make it fresh, you leave it sitting for like 30 minutes and you have this disgusting oxidized brown layer over it. This stuff, it doesn't oxidize nearly as quickly, so you can put it in the refrigerator even if you make an excess amount and it won't like go bad or turn brown. You know, a lot of people don't have an issue with like slightly brown guacamole, but I'm picky. If I see guacamole that's even a little brown, I won't even want to touch that crap. So it tastes really good. It's a little juicier, but it has the same texture as guacamole from avocados. You really taste the lemon juice and apple cider vinegar in it. You taste the onions. The tomatoes are very good too, and it goes very well on the bread. But it doesn't matter what kind of bread you have because there's just the flavor from the guacamole is so powerful that that's overwhelmingly what you taste. So this is very good. This is kind of more like an appetizer though. So let's go on to the main course. All right, so we had our appetizer for lunch, so let's go ahead and move on to the main course. We're gonna have basically 2 of some of my favorite staple foods, rice and beans. And you know, I kind of romanticize these foods a little bit because, you know, when I think about like, you know, the ancient world, ancient times, like, you know, warriors of Rome, warriors of like the Angkor Wat Empire, you know, whatever you want to think of right there, they probably had to travel long distances in order to like for their military conquests. So, you know, they may have like killed a little like wild game along the way, but they probably had to rely very much so on starchy, not easily perishable foods. So I'm talking about like, you know, grains, legumes like oats, foods that provide a lot of nutrition, a lot of calories that don't go bad very quickly, that fuel the body, provided with the complex carbohydrates it needs for high intensity activity because, you know, as any biochemist will tell you, you can't effectively utilize fat for high intensity anaerobic activity. You need to rely on muscle fibers that are not very mitochondrial dense. So anyways, before we get to the rice and beans though, let's go ahead and talk about some other stuff we throw into the meal. So first I'm going to use a little bit more oil. You know, oil's crap, but you know, it helps with the cooking, so I use a little bit of it, like to the point where it's like negligible. So, you know, I'm not even going to measure that. Let's just say that's a teaspoon or half a teaspoon, quarter of a teaspoon right there. It's enough for me to cook basically. And what I have here are some bell peppers, and you know, they're a half of each. We have green bell peppers, we have red bell peppers, good stuff all together. Now, green bell peppers are cheaper, they're nutritionally similar to the other ones, but I like kind of having a colorful dish, just makes it more visually appealing. And you know, when you have like a lot of colors in your dish too, that's a sign that your food is very dense in phytonutrients. And you know, even though it doesn't provide much in this way in terms of macronutrients, it most certainly has a lot of stuff in it that's also just probably good for your general health, helps fight cancer, heart disease, that kind of stuff. So got more onions as well. Onions are great for flavor. You can use garlic too. And actually I am going to use a little bit of garlic. And let me tell you, something about rice and beans for me personally is I feel you don't have any flavor unless you have some rice and beans. So you got to have rice. You don't have any flavor, I should say, unless you have garlic and oregano in your rice and beans. So this is some garlic and oregano. This is actually fresh oregano, but it doesn't matter if it's dry or fresh. And this is some fresh garlic. So let's go ahead and drop that in there. We're going to go ahead and turn this to medium. Some nice little gas stove right there. Let's go ahead and stir this up, and we'll go ahead and get right back to this, and we'll get to the rice and beans. All right, everybody, so we're at the next part of our glorious meal. Right here we have some black beans. This is another can. You can get them dry, but let me tell you, this is like 60 cents, 70 cents, US cents right there. So this is like, the price is very negligible. And you know, you have like this extra liquid right here. A lot of people will drain that, but I actually prefer to keep that in there because it kind of gives it a nice smooth gravy-like texture. So let's go ahead and just dump this whole thing in here. There we go. It just kind of slides out like that. Black beans are very delicious, very nutritious, just very high in protein. This whole can has like over 30 grams of protein right here. So let's go ahead and just mix this all together. And you see like the liquid right there, it's kind of, I mean, a lot of it will dissolve, but it gives it kind of almost like a gravy-like texture. It tastes really good, and you know, the rice soaks up some of that liquid as well. And let me tell you, if you want flavor, you want to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar. I mean, this is my favorite type of vinegar to add to it. I feel without just like a few tablespoons, it's just not very flavorful. So let's go ahead and do that. And, you know, I'm going to measure it this time just because I don't want to add too much of this stuff because it's very acidic. If you have issues with acid reflux, you may want to take like a Zantac or something beforehand, maybe keep some Tums handy, or, you know, just not use that much. So let's go ahead and do roughly 3 tablespoons of this stuff. We're gonna go ahead and mix it in. And of course, I like my food spicy as well. If you like your food spicy, go ahead and add just a little bit of this stuff. And you know, this doesn't have a shaker on it, so I'm gonna have to be very careful getting this off. And I like a lot anyway, so. All right, that looks really good. Okay, and this is just crushed red bell pepper, red pepper. You can find that anywhere. You can find it at Costco probably for like, by the bucket for 99 cents. And all right, so the last thing we're needing is rice, so let's go ahead and add that. All right, so we had our protein avocado toast. Now it's time for the main course. We have this beautiful setup right here. We have the beans, the vegetables all set up, and I have the rice prepared separately. And oh, first let me go ahead and make sure I take my hat off. You know, it's rude to eat with a hat on. So at the table right here, you know, I'm feeling extra lazy today. So what we have is just this pre-packaged brown rice and quinoa. You just nuke it for 90 seconds and it's ready. Now, a lot of times I'll have a rice cooker or I'll just have like a steamer and I'll just prepare, because, you know, I eat a lot of rice. Like typically I actually eat a lot more rice than what you see here. Sometimes I eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner even, just because, you know, it's one of my staple foods, great source of energy, just a great way to really fuel my body throughout the day when I'm physically active. But, you know, I'm just feeling lazy. I don't want to cook right now. I don't want to prepare anything, so I haven't put any rice in the steamer for a while. So I just went ahead and nuked one of these. And this has quinoa in it as well. Quinoa is a good source of protein, and it's just a good source of healthy carbohydrates as well. So what I'll do is that, you know, I have a lot of food here, and, you know, even though this looks like a ton of food, it's really not that calorically dense, so you get a lot. And then that's one of the things about a vegan diet that's kind of a pro or a con, depending on what your goals are, is that since the food is very high in fiber, that means it's very easy to fill your stomach up with food without getting that many calories. And that's why I try to get like a lot of calorically dense vegetables in my diet, or plant-based foods like rice, beans, and that kind of stuff. So I'm not under eating and I'm getting sufficient nutrition. But even with the black beans, this isn't a terrible amount of calories. So adding some rice, quinoa, whatever kind of grain you want, is a good way to just get some proper nutrition in your diet. So I'm going to have some excess right here, but, you know, that's okay, because, you know, you can always just put it in the freezer, put it in the refrigerator, nuke it for another time. And, you know, if you have rice readily available throughout the day, whether it be like, you know, just the microwave lazy kind of stuff right here. And, you know, in terms of nutrition, there's no disadvantage to it. I mean, rice is rice as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this is brown rice. Brown rice is a little bit more nutritious, but I'll eat plenty of white rice as well. And let's go ahead and try this guy out. So take a good scoop of this food. We got some peppers, onions, beans, all in one, not spoon, but forkful. And very, very, very good and very satisfying. I mean, a plate like this will keep me full for at least a few hours, which is a lot for me, because, you know, I'm one of those people with like a bottomless appetite. Very easy for me to eat like thousands of calories of just rice. And sometimes I have to actually be careful not to eat too much because of that, even on a vegan diet. But anyways, that is lunch right there. Let's go ahead and move on to dinner. All right, homies, it's time for some dinner. So let me go ahead and get my chef's hat back on. Don't want to shed. And what we're going to have for dinner tonight, and, you know, this is like going to be reflective of what I eat almost every night. Not that I have the same meal or so, but I like to have something that's very satisfying, so I don't feel the urge to wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning to grab a whole bunch of just crap lying around in my refrigerator, or go out to Del Taco, because, you know, they do have vegan options now. But anyways, we're going to make some pasta fagioli. We're going to go ahead and start with the vegetables. And what we have here is we have some celery. And, you know, I like to leave the leaves on the celery. I think it just adds a nice texture. It just tastes good and just adds a little bit more fiber to the dish. We also have some garlic right here. You know, I cook with a lot of garlic. You know, I'm part Italian, so maybe that's the reason why. It's just in my blood. And, of course, we have onions and carrots. Now, again, and, you know, I hate doing this because I know it's not good for me and I know it makes the video look bad. I'm going to add a little bit of oil. And, you know, there are people who talk about like oil-free alternatives. So I mean, surely you guys can find some oil-free alternative if you don't like using oil. But let's go ahead and use about almost a tablespoon of this junk, just so we can get it to stick to the pot. All right, cool, cool, cool. And we're gonna go ahead and get it on medium heat and let that cook up a little bit. Okay, cool, cool, cool. It is burning up in here. It is a very hot summer. So let's go ahead, and doesn't matter which order it is. Let's go ahead and throw the celery on. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and scoop out the garlic right here. Let's throw in our garlic, our carrots and onion. And we're just gonna go ahead and stir this guy up for a little bit. And then we're gonna go ahead and go to the pasta and fagioli part of our dinner. All right. All right, so before I continue, I should state that this is going to be something that's kind of like a mix between like a soup and a stew. It's not going to be, it's going to be a little bit more condensed than like a soup, but it's not going to be quite like pasta, like spaghetti and meatballs, something like that. It's going to have a little bit more liquid in it. So, you know, when I'm doing dinner, usually I'm a little bit tired towards the end of the day. So, I could cut up my own tomatoes, but I'll just get like diced tomatoes from a can like this. And this is fine, nothing wrong with it. Maybe a little bit more sodium than it would be if like you were cutting up fresh tomatoes. But it's flavorful and nutritious and very, very cheap. You know, canned vegetables, very cheap. I mean, like, you know, people talk about veganism being expensive, but if you're buying like base cheap ingredients like that, no big deal. We're gonna want a little bit more water than this, so I'm gonna go ahead and fill this can up with water. And you know, Colorado water is very clean, so no big deal if I'm using tap water. All right, but if you live in a place with shitty tap water, you might want to filter it. So let's go ahead and add this. All right, so let's go ahead and add some cannellini beans as well. Now you can use other kind of beans, but you know, cannellini beans are like kind of like the traditional recipe. And you know, usually I don't give a damn about tradition, but in this case, I really like the taste of cannellini beans. It also gives me a little bit more variety too, because you know, if you're eating the same kind of food every day, it gets a little bit boring. So you know, I like chickpeas, but those are actually my favorite. But having a little bit more variety, black beans, cannellini beans, a good way just to spice up your day with what you're eating. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour this in here. All right, there we go, there we go. All right, cool. So another thing I should mention is that, you know, like a lot of this food that I'm cooking, like for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is more than what I'm actually going to be eating throughout the day. And that's a good thing because, you know, even though I enjoy being in the kitchen and I enjoy like cooking, I mean, if I were to do this on a day-to-day basis, it would get a little bit tedious. So rather than like do it on a day-to-day basis, you know, once every like 3 or 4 days or once every 2 days, depending on the quantity I'm working with, I'll just go ahead and cook. And everything that I'm not eating, I'll just go ahead and put in Tupperware, put in like the pot, put it in the refrigerator, and then I'll have something to access that's very easy and nutritious that I just need to throw in the microwave for a little while. And therefore, you know, the cooking, the preparation, it's just something I need to do periodically. So it's something that doesn't require that much adherence to. So if you find this kind of stuff tedious, you don't really have to do it as often as you might think, depending on how much you eat throughout the day. So even somebody like me who has a pretty big appetite, I only have to do this once every like few days or so, usually at most. So anyways, let's go ahead and move on. All right, moving on. Now that we have the pot boiling a little bit, you have this beautiful red color right here. We're gonna go ahead and add a few more ingredients. I like spinach. The recipe traditionally calls for it. Nothing wrong with spinach, so let's go ahead and throw this stuff in right here. All right, this is like basically a big handful, and you know, I like to use a little bit more than what the recipe asks for, because you know, I just love spinach. I like to get as many vegetables in my diet as possible. I can kind of sneak them in with everything I do. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a little bit of crushed red pepper. This is optional, of course, but you know, I like spicy food. That's just how I am. And finally, we're gonna add ditalini. This is I mean, you can use any kind of pasta. This is what the recipe traditionally calls for. Now, I do recommend using like whole wheat pasta just because it's a little bit more nutritious. This is not a whole wheat. This is just a regular refined flour. So it's not the healthiest choice right here, but in light of everything else that's in the dish, it's not bad. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour that in. And then what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and stir it up a little bit. And then we don't want to overcook anything. We want to make sure that everything comes out nice and even together. Everything is like just nice and beautiful when it comes out. So let's go ahead and bring it down to low. And then I'm going to cover this guy and we're going to let it simmer.
All right, it's simmering, and I want to add a little bit of oregano. I mean, this isn't something you need to add, but like I like to add this a little bit later so it doesn't get too overpowering. But let's go ahead and throw this in, and we'll cover this back up. Let's just stir it in a little bit. We'll cover this back up. Let's let it cook for a little longer, and we should be good to go.
All right, it is dinner time. My hat is off, and I am good to go. So we have a bowl of tonight's star, which is the pasta fagioli. We got carrots, beans, spinach, a whole bunch of good stuff. And traditionally people add Parmesan cheese to this. And I don't like to do that, of course, because I'm a vegan, but also because I don't like all the mammalian progesterones and estrogens that come with dairy products. And there are some vegan Parmesan alternatives. I'm not a big fan of them. I'd rather go for something that is much more nutritious and kind of cheesy taking, like Bragg's Nutritional Yeast. And I like to add this stuff to a lot of my food. It's very delicious. I can practically powder my nose with this stuff. It's so good. But of course, it's an easy way to get an extra B12, protein, folate, a whole bunch of vitamins and minerals in your diet. And it also tastes good, so you can't go wrong with it. So let's go ahead and mix it up a little bit. Let's try a bite of this. And let's see if it's how I remember it from last time I ate it like a week ago. So, it's still very physically hot. It just came out of the pot. It's very satisfying. I like the starchy taste of the beans. The pasta is good too. And even though it's not whole wheat pasta, I think that the regular pasta tastes a little bit better at least. So at least you have like a flavor advantage there. The celery is very good. And even though this was kind of like a traditional recipe, you can go ahead and modify it any way you want. You can make it less spicy. This is a very spicy one. I put a lot of red pepper in it. Or you can make it more spicy if you want. You can add more tomatoes, less tomatoes, or anything. But either way, it turned out really well, and I'm happy about it. So anyways, that's the last major meal of the day. And a lot of times I'd be done eating, but let's go ahead and have a protein shake before bed. All right. Sometimes at the end of the day, if I'm not satisfied with my overall protein intake or just macronutrient intake in general, I will add a protein smoothie. This is certainly not something I do every day. I don't think protein shakes, protein supplements, or any kind of supplementation, maybe other than the B12 is necessary for a vegan whatsoever. But if I do try to get some extra calories in, I'll try to get like some extra fruit in my diet, because I don't really get that much fruit in my diet to begin with. And even though I eat a lot of vegetables, fruit is very high in like polyphenols and like phytonutrients, things that are just good at like fighting cancer and oxidation in the blood and the arteries. So I know that for long-term health, it's important to have some fruit in our diet. And I try to get a lot of protein as well. So what I'll do is that I'll take something that's a very sweet fruit, something that has like cherries in it, but you also have some blueberries, some low sugar fruit. So you have a combination of higher sugar fruits, lower sugar fruits. The berries are typically higher in fiber, lower in sugar. Cherries are a very sweet fruit, so that way I don't feel tempted to add any sugar to it. I don't feel like adding any agave nectar or stevia or any other kind of artificial sweetener. So I'll take 2 cups of this, and today I'm just going to go ahead and guesstimate it. Let's say that looks like 2 cups. Actually, that looks like 1.5 cups right there. But if I feel like I need to add more, I can always do so. And what I have here is soy milk, which unfortunately has become a very controversial beverage over the past few years because of bullshit propaganda. And of course, I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the content of phytoestrogens, and I don't even know why that needs to be an issue, because you're not a freaking plant. So I don't see why you'd think phytoestrogens would even be biocompatible with your physiology. And actually, on the contrary, soy isoflavones, since they are kind of like a very weak estrogen, they compete with the estrogen receptors on the cell. And they compete with our body's own natural production of estrogen, and all human organisms produce estrogen, even men. In fact, estrogen is very important for some vital functions in the human body, such as cardiovascular health, as well as joint and tissue health. But that being said, a lot of times doctors, endocrinologists, and oncologists will even recommend as a preventative measure, women and even men who are at risk of breast cancer consume a lot of isoflavones, soy isoflavones, because that actually has a net effect on lowering estrogen in the body. So if anything, this stuff lowers estrogen as opposed to raise it. And what's really funny is that a lot of people who talk about, soy boys and phytoestrogens, they consume like cheese, dairy, and those have been proven to have mammalian estrogens and progesterones, both female hormones that are proven to be absorbed by human organisms. I mean, you guys freak out about a freaking plant estrogen, but you think a mammalian estrogen is okay. What do you think is more closely related to us, a cow or a plant? So, it's just a no-brainer right there. But anyways, we got 2 cups of soy milk in here. I already have some soy protein isolate in it. And, soy milk is a great source of protein anyways. and it tends to have a little bit more leucine than other plant proteins, so it's more complete, and I use that term loosely because technically all plant proteins are complete amino acids, although you want to make sure you get a variety of foods in your diet regardless. So I'm going to go ahead and just dump that in, and then just for the sake of texture, maybe get a little bit more potassium and just some of the other good stuff that bananas have. I'm going to go ahead and throw a banana in. This is like one of the brownest bananas I've ever seen, but better not let it go to waste. You know, I'm against food waste, so even if it looks a little brown and oxidized, I'm going to go ahead and eat that anyway. So let's go ahead and dump this in. And, you know, if you want to get it like cold, you can actually freeze these bananas. Sometimes I'll freeze bananas, and that's also a good way to like preserve bananas that are going brown really quickly. So I'll go ahead and dump that guy in. Let's go ahead and put this lid on. All right, cool. And let's go ahead and get this guy started. This is a Vitamix. These things are really cool. I mean, they're a little pricey, but it's a worthwhile investment, even though I think any blender will do, even especially just for like a basic smoothie like this. So it actually has a smoothie option right here. And then let's go ahead and hit play. All right. The whole house isn't going to shake down. It's a powerful piece of equipment for blending smoothies, but I don't think it's going to catch on fire. So let's go ahead and just let that guy blend for like just a little while longer, and then we'll see what the finished product looks like. All right, and it's a beautiful scenic day here in Colorado. I thought I'd step outside a little bit before it gets too dark. And here is the finished product. I actually found some fresh mint, and I decided to plop it on top of my blackberry, cherry, blueberry, soy protein smoothie. And I decided I'd just go ahead and enjoy nature for a little bit in the shade so I don't get too much sunshine, even though I do have a little bit of sunscreen on. And let's go ahead and try this. You know, soy protein isn't the best tasting protein. I think pea protein tastes a little bit better, but as a rule, I don't think any protein powder tastes very good. But if you put like enough like healthy fruit in it, especially if you put a banana in it, and you put a lot of very powerfully flavored fruits in it, like cherries, also like tropical fruits like pineapples, mangoes are really good, then that really masks the flavor of the protein. It still has a bit of a gritty texture, but overall, this is pretty good. This is almost like a dessert for me right here, and I think the mint leaf makes it nice and refreshing. So I ate a lot of food today, and you know, that's appropriate. And you know, sometimes I'll like do things like I'll do intermittent fasting occasionally to control my appetite, depending on how physically active I am. If I'm gonna do a lot of traveling, for instance, and I may not be able to work out as much, then I'll cut down my macronutrients just because it would better adjust to my lifestyle. But this diet and everything I went over today kind of reflects my current lifestyle, which is very physically active, 4 to 6 days of working out per week, in combination with the regular physical activity I do throughout the day. So that physical activity is done, so I'm going to go ahead and enjoy a nice sedentary hobby. Maybe I'll play some Witcher 3, have a good time, and I will see you guys later. So stay tuned. I'm going to go over some macronutrient breakdown so I can go ahead and show you what I consumed today, just to give you a reflection of what components I put in my body specifically in order to fuel my lifestyle. So stay tuned. We are on chronometer now, and I'm going to go ahead and give a breakdown of my macro and micronutrient intake. And here's just an overview of like the volume and weight of everything I consumed today. And let's go ahead and take a look at the total calories consumed first of all. So it's 2,439 calories, and that's 242 calories surplus over my basal metabolism. So basal metabolic rate, that refers to the amount of calories you're going to be burning if just through like, you know, regular functions, involuntary functions of the smooth muscles like digestive health, heart rate, you know, nervous system function, things that you don't have direct control over. So it doesn't factor into physical activity. And this is actually a little bit less than what I normally get, and I usually get closer to like 2,600 to 3,000 calories per day. But I don't think people need to put too much of an emphasis on a caloric surplus, even people who are physically active. I mean, even a pretty intense weight training like workout can sometimes only burn like anywhere from like 200 to 300 calories, and you know, that's like the equivalent of like just a couple soft drinks right there. So sometimes people really do take the you need to eat big to get big thing a little bit too far. So here's my macronutrient breakdown. It says I'm a little bit low on fat, but you know, that's deliberate. I was trying to keep my fat intake low, and the reason why is because, you know, there's only a certain number of calories I can eat per day before I have such a caloric surplus that I'll be gaining weight. So I wanted to put more of an emphasis on carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, because that's what my body uses for fuel, and because they're protein retentive, and also protein because of course protein is very important for the repair and resynthesis of muscle tissue. So this is where my emphasis was, and the fat intake is low, but it's not so low that it's going to cause any problems with like my endocrine system or vitamin and mineral absorption. And also, fat is very satiating, but so is protein, and my diet is very high in protein. That's where the emphasis was right there. So going over like basically just the micronutrient breakdown, I blew it out of the park with about everything here except for vitamin E and vitamin D. Now, I want to say that my vitamin E is usually not this low, and that's because I didn't eat very many almonds, seeds, nuts, and avocados, and those foods are all very high in vitamin E. I mean, you saw that I had protein guacamole made out of peas as opposed to guacamole made out of avocados today. And if things were different, I would have had more vitamin E in my diet. But if you're just like off a little bit for like one day or so, you're not going to develop any like nutritional deficiencies long term or anything like that. And my emphasis was more on protein anyways, so that so it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I was trying to get more protein today anyways. And also vitamin D, that's low, but of course that doesn't count to the amount of sunlight exposure I get. Now, I try not to get too much sunlight exposure, but even like as little as like 10 to 15 minutes of sunlight exposure per day. And it doesn't have to be on your face. It can be on the arm if you're like sticking your arm out of the car when you're driving, or if you're riding a bicycle and you're protecting your face wearing sunscreen. Even a little bit of exposure to sunlight like that will allow you to produce vitamin D. And I've had my blood work done. My vitamin D levels are totally fine. So that's not something I'm worried about in the slightest. And it says my carbs are high, but that's fine. I'm a physically active person. I want to have carbohydrates. That is our body's primary fuel source for high intensity anaerobic activities. And looking over this too, one thing I want to point out is that my omega-3 to omega-6, you see the omega-6 a little bit higher, but I also take a algae-based DHA omega-3 supplement, so this probably should be a little bit higher. And for those who don't know, algae is the source of omega-3 that fish actually get their omega-3 from. So by getting an algae-based DHA supplement, I'm basically just getting it directly from the source. And I don't know that this says 0.033 grams. I do not consume any trans fat. There was nothing that had trans fat in it. I mean, maybe some of the foods have very, very trace amount of trans fats or so, but I avoid trans fats like the plague because they cause heart disease. But and that's another good reason to avoid foods like dairy, because those have naturally occurring trans fat. But usually trans fats are found in like highly processed foods. And I had some like bread and tortillas, but none of those had trans fats in them. And of course, the protein intake was very high. I reached my macronutrient. I've reached my daily percentage requirement for every a specific amino acid. I mean, a lot of times like vegans have issues with like lysine and leucine, but you see there was no trouble right there because I consumed a lot of soy. Soy, unlike other vegan sources of protein, are very high in those two amino acids, so definitely not a problem right there. And a couple of them I was a little bit close to not hitting my requirements on. Like you saw zinc right here. Zinc is about 103%. Usually it's a little bit higher, and actually I do take a zinc supplement every now and then. My sodium intake is a little high, but if you look at like any high calorie diet or a diet that goes above like your basal metabolic requirement, I mean, they're typically going to be pretty high in sodium. And I think that this is probably balanced out by the fact that I eat a diet that's completely devoid of any cholesterol, because I don't consume any animal products whatsoever, and also very low in saturated fat. But anyways, I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. And I wanted to point out the protein thing specifically because that's the one macronutrient nobody on a vegan thinks you can get on a vegan diet, but I got that very easily. I mean, even if I didn't take the protein shake, I probably still would have gotten my protein requirements because this is like well over what I needed. And it's not 100% perfect, but very rarely is a diet going to be 100% perfect every single day. But I think that it is reflective of a healthy, active lifestyle. I know it makes me feel good throughout the day, and of course, how good you feel isn't necessarily a measurement of good health. But I feel that for my specific goals and what I try to do on a day-to-day basis, this is a sufficient way to fuel my body. And I just wanted to show this, guys, to you after showing you everything I ate throughout the day, just to show you that it was nutritionally adequate. But anyways, I don't think there really is very much else to talk about outside of my chronometer. And of course, like, I have a large variety of foods. So what you see me eat on Friday may be completely different than what I eat on Monday. But the emphasis, of course, is usually the same. So high protein, like high complex carbohydrates, low fat, and in any case, I hope you guys found this video informative. I'll be back with more content soon. And thank you guys for this suggestion. I've been willing to make this, wanting to make this video for a long time. And I'm glad you guys encouraged me to do so because it was fun to make. And I hope you guys enjoy watching. All right. I hope you guys have a great day.